When people think of sports betting, they think of just having fun or voting for their favorite team to win. But for some, it's a hobby, which then turned into an addiction, which then turned into criminal activity that got a referee 15 months in prison. But this rise didn't happen overnight. It's a story with a dark side, and over the years, sports betting has brought excitement and a lot of money, but also scandals and corruption. It has changed how games are played and how fans experience sports. Once upon a time, the idea of open betting on an NFL or NBA game was unthinkable, and it's become a normal part of sports culture. But how did we get here? To understand the dark rise of sports betting, we need to look back at its history, at the big scandals, the battle against gambling, and how little by little gambling companies took over modern sports. And by the end, you might wonder, has sports betting changed the game forever? Well, stick around to the end to find out. Betting on sports is not new at all. People have been making wagers on sports for as long as sports have existed. Even in ancient times, spectators would bet on chariot races or gladiator fights. For many, placing a bet added extra excitement. It gave every goal, basket, or touchdown a bit more thrill. In the early 20th century, betting on boxing matches, horse races, and baseball games was common, though often it was done in secret or in places like Las Vegas where it was actually allowed. However, back then, there were no big online apps or TV ads for betting. It was mostly done through local bookmakers and sometimes even shady characters tied to organized crime. By the 1910s and 20s, sports betting had already become a big underground business. It was illegal in most areas, but that didn't stop fans and gamblers. They would find a way to put money on their favorite teams or outcomes, creating a whole shadow economy around sports. This was largely unregulated, meaning there were no official rules or protections. If you won a bet with a local bookie, you might get paid or you might not. If that bookie decided to disappear, it was a risky world. Both sports leagues and team owners in those days knew that gambling was happening, and many were worried about it. They feared that if gambling got too close to the games, it could lead to cheating or players taking bribes to lose on purpose. In other words, gambling was seen as a threat to the honesty of sports. These fears were not unfounded because soon, one of the biggest sports scandals ever would prove just how real that threat was. The year is 1919, and baseball is the biggest sport in America. The World Series is being played between the Chicago White Sox and the Cincinnati Reds. The White Sox are strong favorites to win, and everyone expects them to dominate. But as the series begins, something strange happens. The White Sox players seem to be underperforming, making unusual mistakes. The Reds start winning games, and fans are confused. Could it be nerves, or is it something else going on? It turns out a terrible secret was lurking behind this World Series. Known later as the Black Sox scandal, several White Sox players had made a deal with gamblers to deliberately lose the series in exchange for money. Heavy bets had been placed on the underdog Reds with illegal bookmakers right before the series, and rumors swirled that the games were fixed, aka rigged. Those rumors were true. The players were paid by gamblers tied to crime groups to throw the games. The best of 9 series, which back then the World Series was 9 games, ended with the Reds winning. Later, investigations found that 8 White Sox players were involved in this plot to lose on purpose. This was huge news. Imagine learning that the championship you just watched was rigged. One of the players involved was a superstar, Joe Jackson, who had one of the highest batting averages in history. Whether he fully participated in the cheating is still debated, but his name, along with his teammates, was dragged through the mud. In 1921, just 2 years later, after a trial, a jury actually acquitted all 8 players of criminal fraud, meaning they found them not guilty. But that didn't mean they were welcomed back to baseball. The new commissioner of baseball, Judge Canasso Mountain Landis, decided to make a strong example of them. He banned all 8 players from professional baseball for life. Regardless of the jury's decision, they could never play again. This punishment was meant to show that gambling would not be tolerated in sports, and indeed, it left a dark cloud over baseball for decades. Fans lost trust because if the World Series could be rigged, what about other games? Despite the harsh lesson of 1919, gambling didn't disappear. It simply slithered into the shadows and found new places to strike. The next big series of scandals happened in the world of college basketball in the late 1940s and 1950s. The term to know here is called point shaving. Point shaving is when players purposely don't score as much as they can or make intentional mistakes to keep the score within a certain margin. Why would they do this? Because gamblers often bet on the point spread, which is how much a team will win by. If a team is expected to win by 10 points, a gambler might bribe players to only win by 5 points, thus shaving points off the margin and winning the bet. The team still wins the game, but not by as much as expected, so it's sneaky, and back then it happened a lot in college hoops. The biggest incident was in 1951, often called the biggest scandal in college basketball history. It turned turned out that between 1947 and 1950, 33 players from 7 different colleges were involved in point-shaving schemes. This was huge. It wasn't just one team, but a network of players across multiple schools working with gamblers. Even the defending champions, City College of New York, were involved. CCNY had amazingly won both the NCAA and NIT tournaments in 1950. Yet, by 1951, 3 of their star players were found to have taken bribes to affect games. The scandal was so bad that CCNY's reputation in sports was ruined. The college actually de-emphasized athletics and eventually dropped down to a lower division in basketball, away from the bright spotlight. This college basketball scandal showed that no level of sport was safe from gambling's influence. Organized crime figures were often behind the bribes and dangling cash to young athletes in order to win bets. Many of the players involved were punished, though interestingly, most players avoided jail by cooperating with authorities, while the gamblers themselves went to prison. The public reaction was shock and anger, and these were student athletes expected to play fair and for the love of the game, yet they helped gamblers cheat other honest fans out of fair games. However, by the 1960s, sports leagues were determined to keep gambling as far away from their games as possible. They worried that even a small gambling scandal could make fans doubt what they were seeing was real. The NFL was especially strict. In 1963, NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle made a bold move. He suspended 2 star players, Paul Harnung and Alex Karras, for an entire season just because they had bet on NFL games. Harnung was a superstar running back for the Green Bay Packers, and Karras was a great defensive lineman for the Detroit Lions. These guys were big names, and they hadn't even bet against their own teams or done anything to fix a game. They simply just placed some bets on NFL games, which was against the rules. Commissioner Rozelle wanted to send a loud and clear message: no gambling allowed, period. When banning the 2 players, Rozelle famously said, "The only way the NFL can be hurt is through gambling." In other words, football had become so popular that he believed only a gambling scandal could truly damage the sport's reputation. This quote shows how serious the league was about the issue, and the NFL feared ending up like baseball did after the Black Sox scandal, so they adopted a very tough stance. For decades, the NFL and other leagues like the NBA forbid players, coaches, referees, and anyone involved from even visiting casinos or talking to known gamblers. If you even had an appearance of gambling, you can get in huge trouble. And in order to fight all this gambling in sports, the US government even stepped in. In 1992, a federal law called the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act was passed, which basically made sports betting illegal in almost every state. Nevada, home of Las Vegas casinos, was one big exception. This law came about because people like Senator Bill Bradley, who was a former NBA player and a US senator, and all the other major sports leagues supported it. Senator Bradley argued that if states allowed sports betting, it would send a bad message, treating athletes like roulette chips instead of people. The idea was to protect the character of sports for young fans and everyone. In short, the nation tried a kind of prohibition on sports gambling, just like alcohol had prohibition in the 1920s. For a while, this law did limit legal betting, but from 1992 onward, only a few places like Nevada could have legal sports books. But just like with alcohol prohibition, making betting illegal didn't make it disappear. Instead, it went underground or online, often illegally. People still bet. They just did so through unofficial means, maybe a local bookie or offshore betting websites. It was estimated that Americans were still betting around $150 billion each year illegally on sports despite the ban. But while the leagues were standing guard at the front door, something was sneaking in the back door. All that illegal betting was still happening just out of sight. And then, one day, a scandal came along that forced the NBA and fans to confront the fact that gambling had already infiltrated the highest level of pro sports. In the year of 2007, headlines broke that shocked basketball fans. A respected NBA referee, Tim Donaghy, was caught in a gambling scandal. Donaghy had officiated hundreds of NBA games over 13 seasons. Fans trust referees to be fair as they enforce the rules, but Donaghy had a secret. He was betting on games that he refereed and sharing inside information with gamblers. In other words, the one guy on the court who was supposed to be completely neutral had money riding on the outcomes. It sounded like a movie script. Donaghy worked with 2 old friends who were betting on NBA games. He would tip them off about games. For example, if a certain crew of refs tended to call more fouls, or if a star player had an injury that wasn't public, those friends would then place bets. And if the bets paid off, Donaghy got a cut of the winnings. There were even accusations that Donaghy might have made certain calls during games to help the bets, though it was never definitively proven that he outright fixed the game's outcomes. However, it was proven that he did bet on many games he worked, which is a serious breach of trust. The FBI got wind of this scheme while investigating other crimes, and it all came crashing down. Tim Donaghy pleaded guilty to fraud charges Essentially, he admitted to using insider knowledge to profit from gambling. He was sent to federal prison for 15 months for his actions, and the NBA and its fans were stunned. Nothing like this had ever happened in the league's history. This was a referee, not a player, which made it even more alarming because refs can subtly influence games so much. After all, a foul call here or there can change a close game's outcome, and point spreads can be affected by every point scored or not scored. NBA Commissioner David Stern called the Donaghy scandal a wake-up call for the league and a sign that they couldn't be complacent or assume it could never happen to us. The NBA beefed up its monitoring of referees and put in new rules and educational programs to ensure this wouldn't happen again. For many fans, this incident was chilling. It showed that the dark hand of gambling could reach right onto the court in a modern professional sports league. It felt like the Black Sox all over again. For decades, sports betting in the US lived in the shadows, except in Las Vegas. But a major shock came in May of 2018. That year, the US Supreme Court struck down PASPA, which is basically what I mentioned before, is a sports betting ban in most states.
The Supreme Court today struck down a law that was passed by Congress in 1992. And the law barred gambling on sports in most states. So that's football, basketball, hockey. Nevada was the only state where people could wager legally on the results of a single game. And today, the Supreme Court said that states can allow gambling on sports if they would like to.
And this was a rapid change because by 2025, over 30 states have legalized sports betting in some form, including big states like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and many more. Millions of adults who had never been able to bet legally can now simply download an app or go to a sportsbook and place a wager on a game. In just a few years, something that was illegal transformed into a mainstream hobby for many. A recent poll found that nearly 1 in 3 Americans has placed a sports bet in the past year. Sports betting moved from the back of the stadium to literally the front of the crowd. At first, the sports leagues were cautious. Remember, these are the same leagues that once banned players just for betting a few bucks and refused gambling ads on TV. The NFL, for example, had long treated Las Vegas like a forbidden city, and they wouldn't even hold a Pro Bowl there or let a team relocate there. But the money spoke to them, and the potential money in legal sports betting was enormous. By legalizing and regulating it, not only could states tax it, but the leagues realized they could make money too. So very quickly, the attitude of the league shifted from stay away to how can we get a piece of this? The NBA was actually one of the first to see the opportunity. The commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, even wrote an op-ed in late 2015, before the Supreme Court condition, suggesting that legalizing and regulating sports betting might be the best way forward. After 2018, the NBA moved fast. The league began signing partnerships with betting companies, and today the NBA has 17 authorized sports betting partners, including big names like FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, Caesars, and even an ESPN branded betting app. 2 of those, FanDuel and DraftKings, are official partners of the leagues. What does that mean? It means the NBA gives them official data and branding, and in return, the league gets sponsorship money. By the 2023-24 season, the NBA was expected to earn around $160 million just from casinos and betting sponsors, a number that's growing every single year. And the NFL, which had been the most conservative, also joined in, though a bit more slowly. In 2021, the NFL announced its first ever sportsbook partnership with Caesars, DraftKings, and FanDuel. Now, the NFL has 3 official betting partners and allows betting companies to advertise during games. It's almost hard to believe that the same NFL that once banned a Las Vegas ad actually held a Super Bowl in Las Vegas in 2024. And if you've watched any sports games today, especially the NBA or NFL, you'll notice something very different from, say, about 10 years ago. Advertisements for sports betting are everywhere. And one thing is certain, sports will never quite be the same as they were before. Whether you place bets or not, you are now a spectator to not just the game on the field, but a whole new game off the field, the betting game. With all its glitter and shadows, as we cheer for our teams, we must also hope that honesty and fair play continue to win out in the end. Although, if you personally, yes you, did enjoy the video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to get a laugh or two in the comment section, comment down below your biggest win or loss in sports betting, as well as YouTube really thinks you're gonna like the video that's gonna pop up. Thank you for watching and have a great rest of your day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.